It's a dark day to be a Sega fan, and an absolutely devastating blow has been dealt to the digital games marketplace as several titles fall victim to the newest wave of delistings from this company. But let's take a closer look at this list of 50 plus titles that is being removed specifically from Steam's online store. Because while a few of the games on this list might be less popular or more obscure entries, the vast majority of them are actually flagship titles in their own right. Hello fellow travelers and welcome to the Hard Light Network. Alrighty guys, today is the day. It is December 6th, 2024, and today marks the death of dozens of classic titles from Sega's lineup. It's a dark day to be a Sega fan, and an absolutely devastating blow has been dealt to the digital games marketplace as several titles fall victim to the newest wave of delistings from this company. Thousands of lifelong fans are feeling the sting of these anti-consumer practices as now over 50 titles are going to disappear from digital marketplaces on every corner of the internet. For those of you who followed my channel for the last few months, you know that I've covered multiple delisting events across the games industry, but this one hits especially hard. It's one thing when a company delists an original version of a game in order to re-release it for a markup, but this time is different as multiple historical titles have been removed with seemingly no plans to re-release them in the future. And I honestly have no idea what motivates these kinds of decisions on the part of the developers, as at least on Steam, publishing a game only costs a one-time fee of $100 that is refunded after $1,000 in sales is made. There are no additional fees to continue hosting games on Steam, and as far as I can tell, it doesn't make financial sense to pull a product off of shelves when it can still make money. And without any public plans for updated ports or remasters, it honestly just feels like great games are being tossed into the garbage. But before we get into it any further, guys, if you want to support the channel, there is no better way than for you to hit that like button, comment down below, and also hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any of the videos we have coming up for you in the future. And of course, if you wanted to go that extra mile, there is a super thanks option down below. Either way, I appreciate you watching this video, and without any further ado, let's get into this video. Today's article comes to us from Game Rant and covers each one of the games that Sega is removing from circulation. Quote, December 6th will be a sad day for Sega fans, as the studio has announced it will be delisting many classic games and bundles from virtual stores. Among the delisted Sega games are iconic titles like Crazy Taxi, Golden Axe, and Streets of Rage, which will no longer be available for new purchases. Sega made a big impact on the industry, especially in the 1980s and 1990s. Sega is famous for creating some classic game series like Sonic the Hedgehog that are almost inseparable from the Sega name. Its Sega Genesis, or Mega Drive console, cemented its place in gaming history, introducing iconic titles that remain relevant even today. Unfortunately for Sega fans, many of these classics will soon disappear from digital storefronts. Sega announced on its official website that many of its beloved classic games and bundles will be delisted from virtual storefronts starting December 6th. Sega has confirmed that even though the games are being delisted, players who already own them won't lose access. They'll still be able to download and play these classic Sega titles from their libraries. Some classic games will remain available for Nintendo Switch Online subscribers, but Sega hasn't shared details about what this means for fans using other platforms. When I tell you guys that this news hit me in the inner child like a sledgehammer, I'm not exaggerating in the slightest. While some of the super fans out there might remember that the very first game that I ever played was actually Resident Evil on the PlayStation, the first console that I actually could say that I owned was Sega's very own Dreamcast, and my favorite game on that system was Sonic Adventure. It actually imprinted so heavily on me that to this day I can vividly remember details about the levels, enemies, music, and even the hours I spent in the Chow Garden. And of course, while I'm grateful for these memories, and doubly so for the ability to still access these few titles that I own that are on this list, I can't help but being a little broken up about the accessibility of these titles being limited for future generations of gamers. No matter how you slice it, delistings of this scale are a massive step backwards for games preservation, and I just genuinely don't see how they benefit these companies carrying them out. But let's take a closer look at this list of 50 plus titles that is being removed specifically from Steam's online store. Because while a few of the games on this list might be less popular or more obscure entries, the vast majority of them are actually flagship titles in their own right. Here we can see insanely popular titles such as Altered Beast, Comic Zone, Crazy Taxi, Echo the Dolphin, Eternal Champions, Golden Axe, Nights into Dreams, and even the Phantasy Star franchise. But it doesn't end there, with titles such as Rystar, Shinobi, and the Streets of Rage franchise all on the chopping block. Hell, even the remaining Sonic games in this collection didn't make the cut, with this being the second round of delistings to affect the franchise in particular. And the list goes on, with the entire Sega Genesis Mega Drive collection being totally wiped from the online store. This is essentially the burning of the Library of Alexandria when it comes to classic Sega titles. And as I've said before, this genuinely feels like one big middle finger screw you to the customer and lifelong fans. And I'm not the only one to notice, with reviews for this collection absolutely tanking in recent weeks as customers are realizing that there is no love for them from this company. And while there are a few positive reviews left at the top of the page, they're all from years ago, as the majority of recent reviews are negative and aimed at voicing their displeasure with the actions of this company. And to add insult to injury, not only was there very little heads up in the way of warning customers that these games were coming off the market, they didn't even bother putting it on sale for the people that wanted to pick it up. Of course, they were never obligated to tell anyone or run the collection at a reduced price, but it certainly would have helped soften the blow from the delisting. Regardless, it's just another example of the callous and apathetic attitude that these companies have towards the customers that have brought them so much success. But thankfully, us classic gamers can still take comfort in the knowledge that the digital copies we actually own are still available to us. At least for now. But before I wrap up this video, guys, I did have one more piece of the discussion that I wanted to touch on just briefly. That, of course, being the complex, if sometimes volatile, relationship between archivists and collectors. Personally, I tend to find myself in both camps and agreeing with some points made by both sides. On the one hand, I think that emulators are an amazing way of preserving digital versions of these titles, and they make these games much more accessible to future audiences. That being said, lately I've made more of an effort to grow my collection of physical copies of these games as well as their respective consoles. While there are numerous benefits to the customer in emulating digital copies of these games, there's just something about physically owning the game that does something different for me. The nostalgic pop of cracking open that plastic case, the delicate 5-finger grip on the disc as you unseat it from its casing, even just flipping through the glossy pages of a full-color player manual is an amazing experience. Gently laying the disc in the tray, the tactile press of the button on the console, and the little chime that it makes whenever you turn it on or off. It's a part of the experience that you just can't emulate. Recently, I got to have a pretty in-depth conversation with an industry insider about this particular topic while searching for new games for my collection. Of course, being a salesman of these collectibles at a retro game store, he's not exactly the biggest fan of emulators or archivists in general. His major argument was that their actions devalue his products by adding more accessibility. Scarcity creates value, and that value is what he relies on to sell his collectibles. And I mean, it makes sense when you search online for physical copies of some of the individual titles on this list. Some of them are worth up to 3 times as much as the entire collection by themselves. He sees owning physical copies of these games as an investment, similar to owning gold or silver. And even though on the surface it might sound a little silly to some, he's not exactly wrong. I've seen multiple examples of these titles from my childhood absolutely skyrocket in value, with some of these titles being valued at $5, $10, $15 back in the day, now worth 5 times as much. Hell, just the other day, I saw a used copy of Zelda Twilight Princess going for $135. However, the same scarcity that gives the physical copies of these games so much value is also the biggest threat to their longevity. Sooner or later, for one reason or another, the physical copies of these games and their respective consoles will cease to function. Whether they're damaged, degraded, or straight up discontinued, the physical market will not last forever. Discs are sensitive to light, console components are subject to dust and heat. Even in the best possible circumstances, we're looking to 40, maybe 50 years for the shelf life of some of these titles. We are at a critical juncture for the preservation of a lot of these consoles, and for some of them, it might be too late already. I've already mentioned this in one of my previous videos, but a study conducted by the Video Game History Foundation and Software Preservation Network showed that 87% of classic games released in the US are now out of print. And while the last physical copy of Kuon might be worth millions of dollars, once the hardware finally craps out, it's not going to be worth anything. So as gamers, if we actually care about the longevity and value of these titles, it's time to start seriously talking about games preservation efforts and changing the laws to help benefit them. There has got to be a happy middle ground between satisfying the collectors and making sure that these titles make it to future generations. And if it matters to you half as much as it matters to me, then you can do your part by hitting that like button, subscribing so you don't miss out on any content that I've got coming up for you guys, and also remember to hit the comment section with your thoughts down below. I've got big plans for this channel, and once we get the ball rolling here, we're going to devote these resources to helping both the collectors and the archivists see their goals through. So do me a solid and share this video with a friend, and also pick up an old video game and play it while you still have the chance. And as always, thank you guys for watching. If you liked the video, leave a like, and until next time, love you guys, safe travels.